Congress now back in session for 3 weeks, and as we know, congressional leaders will not be taking up several key issues, including among them immigration, during this brief session. This is thousands of children flee Central America alone, setting out for a better life in the U.S. and oftentimes facing grave danger on their journey, and they also face grave danger if they remain in their home countries. And I'm now joined by some folks on the front lines of this issue stateside here. Susan Henner, who is an immigration attorney in White Plains, vice president of the nonprofit Safe Passage Project Corp., co-chair of the Westchester County Bar Association's Committee on Immigration and Nationality Law. Graciela Heyman, she is the executive director of the Westchester Hispanic Coalition and vice chair of the New York Immigration Coalition. And Pat Young, Pat's an attorney and program director at the Central American Refugee Center and a founding chairperson of the Long Island Immigrant Alliance, and he was also founder of the National Committee for U.S. Action on Asylum Concerns, which later merged into that National Immigration Forum. Welcome all to the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll get into the policy and the politics, the important stuff in a second, but I think I speak for a lot of people. I've had senators and congressmen on, and we've gone back and forth on the issue, but a lot of times the extent of the public's exposure to this issue, if they don't know any of the people directly involved, is you'll see video of people crossing the border, and then you'll hear people in certain communities with bullhorns yelling as a bus will go by, and a lot of sound and fury without a lot more heat than light. So what I wanted to do is, you three folks, this isn't just a policy debate, this is what you live, and you know this population that we're talking about and put a face on it. So I'd want to start there, and if I can go around here, and I'll start with you, Susan. Put a face, give a story to the audience as to who we're talking about, of the thousands upon thousands of people who've come from primarily Central and Latin America to the U.S., and overwhelmingly a lot of these, we're talking about children.
Right. We're seeing children coming alone to join their families who are already here. We're seeing moms and dads with children coming over the border looking for better life, looking to escape and flee from their country where they've been subject to gang violence, to persecution, to other things that are going on in their country. And, you know, we've been managing this so-called surge dockets at immigration court over the last couple of weeks, which are extra court dockets which are added by the judges in order to manage these children. And the sad part is when you come over the border, especially a mom with a child or a dad with a child, they're snapping bracelets, monitoring bracelets onto the parents of these children, and they're required to check in every month at immigration. In addition to going to immigration court, they're treated like criminals, even though they're here seeking political asylum, seeking a better life, just seeking to join family members who are here and running from their countries.
I know every story is different, but is there one story, Susan, one personal story that stood out to you?
I had a story where I had a 14-year-old child who was a daughter left behind. The parents had relocated here. The father passed away. The mom was here in the United States, and the daughter was left with her grandparents. The grandmother died. The grandfather, unfortunately, sexually abused the child. The child fled. Her aunt helped her come to the United States and find her mother. And, you know, the child is now here. We're helping the child to seek special immigrant juvenile status in this country and hopefully stay here.
Grace, same question for you. A particular story that stuck with you that's kind of emblematic of this issue.
Okay, so I think as I was reading an affidavit that goes with the Special Immigrant Juvenile Status application, I was reading the personal story of this young woman who was from El Salvador, and she went to school, and a boy followed her, and the boy was a gang member and asked her to be his girlfriend. And she panicked. She knew she had to leave. She had had 3 cousins killed by gang involvement. She had one cousin who was the girlfriend of a gang member and then wanted to cut it off, and she was found killed. Another one of her cousins refused to be the girlfriend of a gang member, and she was found cut up in pieces. And then she had a younger cousin, a boy, who was used in drug trafficking, and he wanted to get out also, and he was killed. So the minute that the gang member approached her, she knew she had to leave. She didn't even tell her grandparents she was leaving because she didn't want to put them in, you know, in danger. And she made the journey by herself to find her mother, who was here.
Pat?
Yeah, I can think of a young woman, about 13 years old, on Long Island, who came to us a few weeks ago, and she came here to join her father. One of the things we should remember is that these are not children coming from Central America. These are children whose families often live in our communities in Nassau County, Suffolk, in Westchester, and elsewhere in New York State. And she was coming here because two of her relatives were murdered by Mara Salvatrucha, which is a very violent gang that started in the United States and then spread to El Salvador. She herself now was being targeted by them, and she understood that her youth was not going to be a protection, that in fact it made her vulnerable. And so she took the extremely dangerous trip through Mexico, through Guatemala, to come to the border and then presented herself at the border. She wasn't trying to evade the immigration service. She was actually trying to turn herself into the Border Patrol, turned herself in, and now she's here on Long Island and she's completely confused. She has no idea what the legal system is, what the structure is. She doesn't know if she's going to be allowed to stay here or not, or if she's going to be able to go to school. And so we've been working with her over the last several weeks in order to orient her and to try to get her some representation.
We'll talk about some of the numbers in the next segment, but when you're talking about choices between bad and worse, for those children that are returned back to their country of origins, we're hearing horror stories there, not just what they're fleeing, but what they come back to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, one of the stories that was reported on last month by the Los Angeles Times were 5 teenagers who were deported back to San Pedro Sula in Honduras, which is, you know, one of the centers of gang activity, and those 5 young men were all murdered, and that's just over the last 8 months. So yeah, we know that many of these children, if they're sent back, will be in grave danger. They left because of danger, but they're in even more danger when they go back.
And if there's one thing to leave folks with in terms of the faces of these people, and it's not that this is some spring break for them, right? They're really making choices a lot of times out of either self-preservation or because they're risking the coyotes, they're risking the dangers, they're risking everything that goes attached with it, including the sexual predators, et cetera, and all the uncertainty about going to a country where they probably don't even speak the language and may or may not be able to reunite, because even that's better than the reality of today, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're leaving behind family, friends, anything, just to come here to safety. That's the long and short of it.
And if I may add, you know, I think, you know, we have to take this out of the realm of immigration, and we have to put it into, you know, humanitarian crisis. You know, I really see so many parallels between, I see these children as refugees and that are running away from, you know, from horrible conditions. So, you know.
And then the challenge is going to be, especially in the political climate that we're in right now, what will or should a policy look like that'll come out here that'll address this situation. So when we come back after this quick commercial break, we're going to get into the policy and the politics of this, and also our panel is going to help separate some of the reality and the rhetoric that's often surrounding this issue as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back.